Welcome to Thrive in the Mess. I'm your host, Lisa Hutchcraft Whitmer. So, hey friend, welcome to Thrive in the Mess. And today we're doing a deep dive into walking through cancer. And I think all of us can say we have known someone who's walked through cancer, a loved one, a friend, or have walked through it ourselves. And I am really thankful to have a very special guest today who I'm actually related to through marriage. His name is Jay, my brother-in-law. And he actually ended up being diagnosed with cancer when he was in his 30s, and his children not even teenagers yet. And I'm really excited to hear his thoughts. So Jay, welcome to Thrive in the Mess. You are very successful in your field, successful businessman. You have a beautiful wife, 2 amazing children, and then you have this cough that came out of nowhere. You want to just kind of dive in and tell us some of your story?
Yeah.
And for a long time.
Even when I cough to this day, it's a trigger for my wife. She's like, you better go get that checked out. I'm like, I just have a cough. But no, I was coughing not only for a week or two or a month or two, it was about 10 months of a cough. And it was pretty persistent, just like always just irritating me. And I'm like, I'll take care of that later, as most guys would say. Not a big deal. I'm just coughing. But I started to lose a lot of weight too. Thinking in my mind, I'm like, man, I'm getting in great shape. Going for like 200 pounds, and I got down to like 150 pounds. And then people started to ask me questions like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm just like down to a size 32 waist. I'm doing awesome. Maybe even less than that. But you can look back at pictures now before he like even knew something was really off. And wanted me to go see a doctor. And finally in like July 2017, I'm like, all right, I'll get some blood work done and it's a routine visit, and I was going to get back to my my life, my day job, and I was running really fast at the time. And a lot of this conversation we'll talk about pace is a massive deal to me to this day. Like I think time and how we look at time and how we wrestle with time, or ultimately wrestle with God with His timing, is a big part of this story. But anyways, I was going super fast. I'm like, all right, I'll get this out of the way, knock it out, and go to the doctor. And it was like on a Wednesday. Like on a Wednesday night or Thursday morning, she's like, well, your markers are not good. In fact, I think you need to go see an oncologist pretty quickly. I'm like, what? Like that was out of left field. Like I thought it was just solve my cough, give me a Z-Pack or whatever, and I'm back on my way. But the markers, I think my hemoglobin levels are like super low, and my blood count, my white cell blood counts, all that stuff. They're like, something's not right here. You need an oncologist. And I was able to get into, strangely enough, Cleveland Clinic within like 24 hours. It doesn't happen this way. It's very much a God thing where like a connection called the board, somebody on the one of the guys I worked with knew the board, who called the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, who got me into their top oncologist within like 24 to 48 hours. So when I'm sitting in front of him and he's looking at my blood work, first thing he said was like, how did you get in to see me so fast? Like, it's just kind of one of those things that things happen quickly. And we were able to get to the root of what my cough was about, as they took a bunch of scans pretty quickly. I had 2 massive tumors on my spleen. So the first thing was like, I'm not sure what, if those are cancerous. They didn't really use the word cancer at the moment, but like you got to get that out. A spleen is a kind of a non-vital organ. It's basically an enlarged lymph node, but it really helps with your immune system. And most people have them. I no longer have my spleen.
Right.
But we're going to have a splenectomy, and they're going to just kind of, do it laparoscopically and kind of zip it out. But it was so big, it was about the size of a football. I have a picture of it. It's gross. I don't think I've ever shown you.
What's interesting? I actually do remember you texted. I think you texted family at the time, and I was like, wow, because you had been losing weight, but then your spleen was huge. But I'm wondering if we could just try to say splenectomy like 10 times fast. No, I'm just kidding.
It's very natural now. A word. One thing, when I had my splenectomy, they said, well, you have to have a flu shot every year. I'm like, really? That's the one thing I got to do? Like, yeah, well, you just need to be watching your immune system because you don't have,
right.
a natural organ to kind of fight against that. So it was huge. They took it out with, like, I did a cut me up in the middle, so it wasn't laparoscopic. It was too big.
Right.
Massive surgery. I'm in the hospital a couple of days. They send me home, and my oncologist then called me. I was like a following Friday. By the way, this was like late July, and all of a sudden, like August 8th, or I think it was my surgery, my daughter's birthday. Is like had surgery, and then that Friday he called me. He's like, I need you to come in. I'm like, well, I just had surgery and I literally can't get out of bed. Like I'm not going anywhere out of my own home bed. Like I have a feeling I know what you're going to say. Why don't you just say it? And Corey's on the phone with me. He's like, yeah, well, we did a biopsy of your
Mm.
spleen. It is tumorous. It's called diffuse large B cell lymphoma, is what he said. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but he says
Right.
non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He says, I can't, I'm not going to be able to be the one that treats this, but I have another guy, another peer at the Cleveland Clinic who does. In fact, he's doing a clinical trial right now. Why don't you come in and meet him as quickly as you can? Because once they kind of got into the scans and realized they might have gotten it all with surgery, but with that type of fast growing cancer, I wouldn't say it's high risk, but it's high growth. And they said
Mm.
you need systematic treatment, is they use. So systematic treatment means chemo. You have to go through, rounds of chemo. There's a very standard dose of what they call R-CHOP. It's just kind of a cocktail. They normally give people with
Mm.
non-Hodgkin lymphoma uh, once a week, every 3 weeks, 6 times. What they offered me, and they said, would you like to be in a clinical trial? I said, sure, why not? I was patient number 17, and the first 15 had already gone into remission. So I was on a pretty
Oh,
fresh
wow.
clinical trials. Like those numbers sound good. When they gave me the odds, saying, well, like normally it's like 70% the survival rate on this cancer, maybe 75%. I'm like, well,
Mm.
and they said, if you're gonna get a cancer, this is the one to get. People say that a lot of different. If you're gonna get sick, you might as well get sick like this. I don't know if that was meant to be a positive, but I always just
Encouraging.
keep increasing the odds, I guess, medically and scientifically. I'll take 15 out of 17 odds. And all they
Right.
did is basically introduce another drug for multiple myeloma that they inserted in instead of once a week, every 3 weeks, it was 3 days in a week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday regimen. And they just mixed up the dosage of, what I got. But I had to go in for that treatment 6 times. So it's over 18 weeks. So think almost like 4, 5, 6 months.
And you
Uh,
were still recovering from surgery,
I
or
just
do you
recovered
like
from
heal
surgery.
up?
So like it was like within another week or two, all right, get up out of bed and get in and start treatment number 1 out of 6 rounds. So and there was other complications to kind of get into that. Like they had to do a bone marrow biopsy and that was
Mm.
painful. And like as
Mm.
far as just going through treatment, there was, whack-a-mole sort of stuff. But like that's what like anybody's going through it right now or has gone through it personally or they've seen somebody go through it. Like it ain't pretty. But
Right.
they gave me good guidance of like, well, this will be a cumulative process. So as you start going through treatment, you may not feel awful on day 1 or even on day 2 or day 3. In fact, you sometimes don't they kind of put a bunch of prednisone in you after you like knock you down, they build you back up with a steroid. Like you
Mm.
feel like Superman, like, oh, this is awesome. I feel great. Let me go back to work. And I was kind of in the midst of doing work anyways, but again, like I'd screeched it all to a halt. And thankfully my team was built up enough to the point where like they didn't really need me there at that moment. Like we'd done enough work where like I could step out of it, where like it wasn't a radical, oh gosh, where'd he go? And I had a great mentor and partners and teammates that not only did the work while I was gone, but obviously were great friends and supported me. Anyways, that was kind of where it all started. In fact, this again, late 2017, and went treatment all the way up to early 2018.
Jay, so okay, that all came really fast and furious. Like, and even a 10-month cough, like you kind of feel like, well, it could be allergies. It could be, you know what I mean? Especially like you said, the summer, the spring. And so you find we always kind of write things off, can I treat it myself? I'm always thinking, on my own. But that's a lot coming at you at once. Like you're working, you're going fast. You are, like I've said, you're a leader with all of that. You have, your wife, your children, and then boom. Like, how are you even processing that at that moment? You know what I mean? You learn. Okay, they weren't really saying cancer at the beginning, but okay, big spleen, this, and then okay, oncologists come in. I'm still recovering. The bone marrow thing. How are you even processing this at that speed where everything just happens so quickly? And what are you
Yeah,
thinking?
yeah. I mean, it is a record player screech, pause
Mm.
sort of moment. Not just
Thankfully, people do know now what record players are
geez, come back.
because
My
they've
daughter has a
come.
bunch of vinyl records and wants more. I'm like, wait here now,
What?
$40 for a vinyl record? What's going on? Vintages, all about Taylor Swift, I guess. Yeah, it's a big screech, a big stoppage. But I mean, the world didn't stop. I mean, the world keeps going on, but like our world kind of,
Mm,
at least upside down. Uh, Processing. I mean, yeah, uh, obviously, um, being able to talk it through with my wife and try to explain it to my kids. Although they didn't really like. Jonathan got it a little bit more, being a bit older than Katie, who was younger at the time, and she's like, "All right, whatever, hey, things are going to change, and Dad's going to look a little different, sort of thing." Pretty quick.
mm,
It wasn't until maybe round three where I had to shave my head, or this all started coming out. It was round two, in between rounds two and three. But yeah, I mean, I lost a lot of weight. I didn't look like me. And again, looking back at it all, it's like, wow, I really didn't look like me
mm.
um, during that. But I mean, processing for me was first and foremost, we got on our knees and prayed, like, God, all right, what are you up to? And we're like, this is in your hands. And we had tough conversation. Courtney, like, there's no guarantee that this works, or that,
Mm.
I'll, I'll be around forever, or I'll be around much longer. But we had to come to grips with that pretty quickly. Like,
Mm.
this might not end well. But I said, but that's okay. Like, God's got you. God's got this kind of story at play that, like, I think He's going to come through. I pray that He comes through. We'll have, as much hope as possible. But our hope is anchored in something much deeper and much bigger than an outcome or the circumstances around the treatment. I mean, it became a real test of our faith. Like, all right, is what we believe like real? Is what we
Mm.
believe evident then in our life? To where it's no longer about a belief; it's about like how we pour ourselves out among our inner circle, and for those that we don't know as well or don't know at all. And that was what was most profound. I spent, for me personally, as an introvert, as you like to say, I like to process not with people. I like to process, alone, and or I like to read a lot. This is when I kind of started writing more, and I wrote a bit for my living, but in a business sense, I wrote business reports for Wall Street. So I've been writing for 20 years, and all of a sudden I'm
Mm.
writing personally, but almost as a writing that for me to kind of break down, like, like, how do I really reconcile this diagnosis with like where I'm at in life, and like that has some substance to it, not just hey, I got cancer, pity me. Uh, it wasn't like I want attention for this. I wanted to find ways where, like, God, can you provide a light within me that actually radiates out and provides context and or something of substance for others that they can, like, oh, that kind of means something to me, whether they have gone through cancer or have somebody in their family. So it became an interesting way, a bit of a platform. I didn't really think of it as such until I started writing on Caring Bridge that, oh gosh, there's a lot of people that are reading this that like care about me, but like then like share it into their own circles like that. That's pretty profound. So it gave me more motivation to process through writing. But by writing, reading, and then I started listening to a ton of podcasts or books on tape. Now it can start a whole new world for me of content consumption, not for the sake of consumption, but like that. That's a way for me for my brain to process through what's happening. That
Mm.
as I have a little journal to the side, I'll like, hey, this really stood out to me. Whether it's a Bible verse or a podcaster that just said something profound, and I needed that, particularly when treatment was done. Like a little bit during treatment, but when treatment was done, that was the way to process. So we have friends here who are just going through this now, right? Like they just got
Yeah.
the diagnosis. They just finished last treatment. I said, do as best you can to process this on paper, and then through prayer, because like that is a bit of way to pray, journaling. And I'm not a journaler. I wouldn't say I'm even now, but putting stuff on paper and writing it down and thinking through it, going for walks alone or walks together. Um, just slow it down. And like, there's so much noise in the world that just kind of wants you to keep in your lane and go as fast
Right.
as you can in that lane to get to the next spot. Like that, you've probably heard it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And boy, has that been, wildly true in my journey. Go to journey through that with Courtney and with my kids. Because there's a whole back end of this story that, once in remission, like actually, that's when the action began for my life. It wasn't like during what was tough, but God was scripting something pretty mighty
Mm.
in kind of a total different trajectory for my life or for my family's life. And we had no idea even at the time, even though we prayed during treatment, God, do you like, we had been at a 10-year sprint. And by the way, it wasn't just work
Mm.
or our community or family, it was also at church. I'd been recently
Mm.
be on the elder board and be the chair of our elders. at church while this was all going on. That was heavy work. We were kind of in a big turn, if you will, at the church, just trying to like get some inertia back in the right direction for where we're at. That was a lot. That was a pretty big load.
You've
Literally,
been a leader wherever
yeah. Well,
opportunity has led you,
sure,
you know?
sure. So there was a lot, and so it just God is the next 10 years going to look like the last 10 years, or
Mm,
is the next chapter like what does the next chapter look like? And I think this is
mm,
probably something everybody, whether they're praying to a higher power or not, they're wondering what's next. What is the page turn? What is around the corner? And I had a great mentor once tell me, uh, if you think you know what's around the corner, or you're just going to like just charge ahead and like I got this. And by the way, a lot of people said you got this, Jay.
mm.
I got nothing. I got nothing on the wheel. Like I know people say that like a bit of a chip on the shoulder, punch on the shoulder. You got this, dude. And I just was like no I don't. Nor does anybody think that they got this. But anyways, my mentor said if you charge ahead as if you've got the next chapter already solved or planned, uh,
Mm.
God tends not to show up, and or it may not play out the way that you think or want. But if you do have open hands and you admit to yourself you don't know what's around the corner, like God, would you just step into that and show me the way, and then I'll
Yeah.
follow your steps. Very much out of Proverbs. Then like God tends to show up a bit more and lead you down a path of His faithfulness that leads to our faithfulness. We kind of grab onto and like, all right, then something can like actually happen, and that's where I think inertia happens. But again, we were praying God would coming outside of this treatment or this cancer inflection in our life, midlife crisis, if you will, textbook, uh,
Right.
would would uh would alter something in our next chapter.
Mm.
So all of me said, here's kind of how the pace did turn then. So I mean, went through, six months of treatment. So it's from like late August was all this diagnosis, September, like beginning of September, all the way through, late January, rang the bell in February. I'm done. I got my scans in
Wow.
February, and they're like, yeah, this worked. Like you're cancer free, you're in remission. A huge bell ring, having people in the room, the nurses, like there's nothing more special than that. I remember it was like yesterday.
I
But
remember seeing the video and
yeah,
it was just
powerful.
very that moment, that ring the bell, I know it's powerful with cancer, but sometimes I think of we might need that just in other situations in
Yeah.
life that we just need to celebrate and even little steps. Like that's a big one, but it is very emotional for when your loved one has walked through that or a close friend, to see that. And honestly, for anybody, we walked by a bell recently. We just had an appointment somewhere and we walked by this bell and I'm like, I just stopped for a minute. And
Yeah.
Rick and I were there and I was like, wow, you just think of the moments that have occurred at that bell and how dramatic that is. So yeah, I have not forgotten that.
Ring the bell. Like you literally have bring a bell with you to signify a moment, whether it's
Mm,
ending treatment or whatever it is. It's a powerful,
right.
audible and memorable way to literally ring the bell. Now, oddly enough, our cancer hospital did not have a bell. I actually thought it was very strange on their
Oh,
own. So I recruited a cowbell. I got a cowbell, brought it in,
more cowbell. No.
and that's exactly what I said at the moment.
There is cowbell. This thing that sold me on the music for the podcast, there's cowbell in it.
Is cowbell? Okay, great. Well, I did say I've got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell. Ringing the bell and having that. So, and if anybody has a chance to like go to a bell serum, particularly finish
Mm,
treatment, Dick Vitale just finishes like fifth of this, and he rings the bell. Like it's great to be at it. Um,
mm.
of our Uncle Jimmy's daughter went through this, and I was able to be in Tampa because again, this is a little bit of my post treatment. I just finished treatment. I was in Tampa, and I got to go to her bell ringing ceremony. I don't even
Wow.
know her that well, but like inside the family, just like I'm celebrating with you, I'm for
Right,
you, and it's just powerful support for that person,
right.
and for those like it's hard not to be impacted by
Mm,
that if you step into somebody else's cancer story and help them ring the bell. All that being said, this is
wow.
February 2018. I'm like, great, time to get back to work. I mean, it doesn't take long, like to get my life back mentally. And you're like, all right, it was great being back at work where they had a cake for me. Welcome back, Jay. And I was working ish through this journey. I was like plugged in, but like not. I wasn't like totally out for 6 months. But I didn't work normal hours, and sometimes you're up in the middle of the night. It's very strange again, thinking of timing or the time of that season is just all muddled together.
Jay, real quick, I know in one of your blogs I saw this that you wrote at the time. You're like your repeated circle through the day. Like when you think of trying to juggle work, you talked about take pills, eat, ache, complain about the ache, walk the kids to the bus, check email, eat again, lie down, watch Netflix, stand up, stretch, sit down, complain about the ache some more, walk to the bus, watch ESPN, eat, take pills, struggle to fall asleep, repeat, wash and rinse. So that's
Funny.
that's
Yeah.
an intense cycle, you know. So to juggle work in that, you don't even say work in there because even the mental capacity and energy, I feel like, because all our energy is going to all
Yeah.
of this and juggling the emotional uncertainty, unknown. Like, you know, your wife even, like Courtney even said about we're not promised we'll make it through this. And even when we talk to God, I've shared the story of even when, you know, the day my mom died, we were in the ER and I prayed, Lord, can you have life come back into her eyes? And he answered that differently that day. You know, she had more life than ever now, but that wasn't what I had hoped, you know, but sometimes it can go whichever direction. And one other thing, while you were talking, I couldn't help but think of how my dad will often talk about our situation is our assignment. So I can't help but think about people. You've already talked about people in your world who have been encouraged and who you got to share some of your hope with also. And you were talking about, you know, just let whatever, you know, let me be a light and encouragement to others through that journey. And even since then, like going to, you know, someone else's bell ringing and all. But when we don't necessarily like the situation, but somehow God's like, you know what? Some people in that world really may need you at that moment in time and need some of your story and your hope and your encouragement. So I couldn't help but think about that. And I do want to jump. You were talking about jumping back into work, but I wanted to touch on. You also talked earlier about you and Courtney were looking for a hope that was an anchor that was not just, you know, we can't just trust in the chemo and the pills and all the things, but you had a different kind of hope. Can you just talk a little bit about that, the hope that was your anchor?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
and why that's important to you?
Yeah.
And
No, I mean, it's funny because we had plenty of people outside of our faith tradition, our faith background say, hey, I just, you know, I'm thinking good thoughts your way, or I'm passing on some good vibes. You're like, that's great. Or even if they say like, I'm lifting up prayers, like to who and to what, like we appreciate it, but it doesn't ring true to us because it you know, was like we pray to the one creator. And then with, you know, the redemption that we've committed our life to Jesus, that would, you know, actually give us not just hope for the here and now, but hope eternally. That like actually there is a much bigger story at play here that is that the clock doesn't end, and that but it has implications for how we live today. And that to me that this anchoring into like, all right, that doesn't matter. Like my story or what I'm going through is actually not the point. My point is like how do I pour into that bigger story of which I'm just a piece of or cog of, and I created in His image, but for His glory, not for mine, and kind of wrestling through this isn't about me, and or like I don't want to make this all about me. You know, the woe is me. Like I'm a victim in this. Like you know, why God and shaking my fist was just not our initial take, nor ever did we kind of wrestle with doubt through this. Now, there's plenty of people that probably like, why would God ever let this happen to me, or why would a loving God allow even cancer to exist in the first place and just sickness? But like the brokenness that has been there from the beginning of time and the brokenness we see all around us. I mean, everybody's broken. Everybody's a mess. One of my favorite books back in the shelf over here around community, it's a John Ortberg book. And the title alone kind of speaks volumes. Like everybody's normal until you get to know them. And like once you get to know them, it's whether their weirdness or just their brokenness. Like there's a rawness that's going on all around us. That might just happen to be through a cancer story. So fill in the blank, whatever your story is. But if there's not an anchor around that and that kind of storm, good luck. I mean, like the Bible often talks about like waffling in the reeds, or kind of the waves that can get, splash around us if we don't have an anchor. And thankfully, like we did, and we do. Otherwise, like, it would have been much more difficult, not only going through that, but like kind of seeing through the storm, or seeing, even if there was a light at the end of the tunnel, like how would there be light in darkness? And the only way we were able to kind of, process that, or consider that, is like, all right, our light is from above. Our light, who he describes himself as the light of the world. That we want to be a part of that. We want to be a city on the hill that has this reflective light that others. It's like, that's actually. I'd like to kind of see a little bit more about that, or the aroma of Jesus. That, like, that smells pretty good. That smells a little bit different. Tell me more. And our story kind of helped trigger some of that, for our community, for our neighbors, for some of our friends who, some would still to this day, like, yeah, I don't really subscribe to that, but they were impacted by that in ways that, who knows how God will work in their life now or later, or someday, when if they bump into their own cancer story and give me a call again. I don't know, but they're clearly, at the time and even since, as you sort of mentioned, like, I do think God's hand is at work in orchestrating, not causing, but orchestrating all of these relational webs. That circumstances are just secondary, right? So the circumstance of cancer was, I think, secondary, but I think what he was really getting my attention in that moment was like, all right, who is Lord of your life, or what is your top priority in your, not only in your checkbook, but really in your calendar? And that's what I had to wrestle through, because when I came back to work, I'm like, all right, let me kind of get my calendar back in motion. And, to cut it into that story, I actually kind of lost my job. Like, it was in a wholly different direction, not even 6 weeks back into work in that spring. So this is, again, spring of 2018, and like another record scratch of, hey, you lost your health, now you're gonna lose your job. And like, then the white space was totally in front of me. Like, all right, this is a total page turn. This is not just knock cancer out and get back on the horse. This is like a massive left turn in your life. Like, all right, process that. And so we did. Thankfully, we had a long time to process. And by the way, as I tell people, when you go through processing, this is not like a 1 day, 1 week, even 1 month processing. Give it time, give it space, give yourself some grace that you ain't gonna figure it out so quickly. The good news is I was given the gift of time to process. So it wasn't like, you're gone, here's your 2 weeks notice. Like, I had a bit of a package that gave me some time to really think through what's next. And so I had a good about 18 months to figure out, all right, before I kind of fast forward the tape to get to next, let's sit in this moment, and kind of broke it up into 3 6-month chunks. So I took 6 months to do, like, I'm not going to do anything but pray and process and wrestle through. In fact, that the very first thing I did, this is, again, like April 2018, very fresh off of the February scans, April 2018. Courtney gave me a lot of grace. He said, I think I need some windshield time in my car. And I got in the car and I drove all the way to Dallas, stopped at a friend's house in Nashville for the night, drove to Dallas. One of my mentors lives there. He was very instrumental over the previous few years of my life. Spent a few days with him, golfed with him, just started a process by myself and with some like really close inner circle people. And then I drove down, from Dallas to Florida. This is a very natural drive from Cleveland to Dallas to Florida.
Bit of a triangle.
And so I basically had 30 days of kind of this bit of a sabbatical, if you will. I kind of called this my midlife sabbatical, having these 18 months, but it started a 6-month journey of just, all right, God, speak to me, pour into me. Again, this is praying. This is listening to books. This is just kind of also unplugging. Just like, all right, I'm unplugged now. This is an acoustic version of Day that I gotta just give this some open waters, if you will. And that took 6 months, but in that time, and be careful what you pray for, because God, would you speak to me? Would you kind of open up a next sort of thing? And I don't know, if it felt very clear to me, like it was time not for just a new vocation, but a new location. That's important. I wonder if God's like getting us ready to move. Like, I wonder if he's asking us to move. And I just said Dallas. I was just in Dallas. Like, I wonder if he's asking us to move to Dallas. I named it. And like, she immediately starts crying. And I'm like, what did I say? What did I do?
You just upheavaled her world.
Well, it started the conversation, but she tells me now, wait, all these years later, she was crying not because she didn't want to move, but because she also knew that God was telling us to move, like calling us to move. She moved a lot growing up. And so we've been in Cleveland for over 20 years at this point, or about 20 years. And she always wondered, like, why have I been here so long? We're always
Mm.
ready for the next, but we got so entrenched in our community and work and church that we just never considered moving. Why would we? We were in a great
Well, it's
little bubble.
also it's really outside of our comfort zone to even think of that. And you had just been through a lot of upheaval with your health, your work, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, that's a whole nother, like, isn't that, I think it's one of the top stresses, like moving. We just helped
Yeah.
your mom move out
Yes.
of her house. Like
Yeah. That
I
was a
saw that roll
process.
eyes.
Talk about a process.
It is. But those things, it is really up there as one of, I think it's like the top 3 or
It is.
4
Yeah, it
stresses,
creates
so
uncertainty, right? And,
right.
and especially if you don't even know the where. Like we didn't
Yeah.
have, and this was something that a lot of our not only friends but family wrestled with at times. Like
Hmm.
we didn't move for a job or start considering moving for it. Like sort of like, you guys are moving? That's great. Did you get a new job someplace? And I'll get to that part of the story, I guess. But
Not really.
no, like God's calling us. Is very much feels like a bit of an exodus moment for us. Not that we were in slavery in Cleveland. That's,
Right, right.
the way it was presented, again, talk about like journaling. I journaled this, and this was really important. I had somebody speak into this at church, and they came over from Africa of all places. And it wasn't speaking in front of our total church. They spoke in front of staff and elders for a moment. They talked about this transitional phase that they were going through, and they were trying to encourage us moving from a land of not enough, which was Egypt, to a land of just enough, which was, the wilderness, manna from heaven, to a land of more than enough, which was the promised land. And that was very much the process we were in. I wouldn't say we were in a land of not enough, but we were in a land of just enough. It was fine. It was great. But God had something for us that was, more than enough in a different. So anyways, it just started like, hey, maybe God's calling us to move. And
I do want to highlight too that it is amazing that this is your journey, but of course it's also your spouse's journey and your children's journey. But the fact that when you brought it up to your wife, God was already doing something in her heart, and then the two of you together. I love seeing how God does that. That
again,
this is in your
orchestrated,
heart
right?
and mine. Right.
It's
Exactly.
orchestrated, and maybe what's most helpful is like our antennas were up, right? Because often like our heads are down and we're so busy doing what we're doing and like take pride in our full calendars. But like if our heads are down, we kind of miss sometimes not only the bigger point, but sometimes we miss the point altogether because we're so are busy with ourselves and our lives. But if our antennas
And
are up,
here, right, about the antenna, it's interesting because I think you even referred to walking through cancer. So much of the time it can be such a dark place and a desert. I think those are some of the words you used. But then when you have your antenna up to see, okay, God, what's going on?
yeah,
What's coming our way? I like that. It makes it a different journey. It's still
it is.
hard.
Oh, no doubt. It's hard, not fun, painful, all that. But lonely is I'd probably say that too. It could be very lonely. And
What part of it? How so?
well, you get very isolated, and I kind of
Right.
had to again, like going through not only not having a spleen, but then going through chemo. Like you're not like we didn't go to church for 6 months. Like you're not supposed to. I had to address the church through a video, kind of giving them an update on myself or on the church. It's like, hey, hang in there. I mean, it's just be lonely, is isolating. Even with my parents at the time, like I felt bad, but like, hey, we can't see you as much, and that was very tough maybe for
Right.
my mom to not be there and like in our orbit because like we had to really compact it a little bit. So it was just the four of us and neighbors and so forth. And here's another practical thing: we had wonderful neighbors, but there are a lot of people that say, hey, just let me know if I can help in any way. Like that actually, I appreciate the sentiment, but it's not helpful. So if you're to ever like offer somebody who's going through this help, don't ask, just do. And so as the neighbors who just did, that just showed up with like meals every Sunday, or they would just like take our kids places. Like they didn't ask, do you need help? They just provided help. And that one is way more powerful. And again, you can show up in somebody's life by just doing versus asking. Hey, let me take the kids for the afternoon. Hey, let me, here's some Uber Eats cards or whatever it may be. Just kind of like
Right.
help with meals. Meals are probably the most tangible way to help. Make a meal, bring a meal, give them gift cards. But again, you don't want to put, extra work on a family going through it. You want to make it easy for them so they don't have to think about the daily necessities of life. Especially somebody's, maybe just struggling to pay the water bill. I don't know, whatever it may be. That like, how can you show up in a way where you don't ask, you just do. Anyway, this is a bit of a sidebar comment because those who did uh, made a pretty big impact in our lives, and you kind of know pretty quickly who kind of your deep, uh, reliable people are.
You
You
know,
know,
Jay, it may be little sidebar, but that was one of my questions for you of what would you tell someone on the outside, what would you encourage them to do of how can you help? And when you just said that, I couldn't help but think if I had a friend reach out when literally it was just a couple days after my mom died. I'm sitting in the middle of my bed. Our family are different places, like with other family, or one still wanted to go back to school for the end of year stuff. And then I think Rick was helping on getting like the photos together for, PowerPoint of mom's life and all. But I'm sitting in the middle of the bed in my pajamas still trying to write my mom's obituary. And I had a friend text me and say, what can I do? And I actually was like, I just want my favorite Sonic drink right now. That would just mean the world. And she came over, and at the same time, she did a load of dishes, folded a load of laundry, maybe even started other laundry. But sometimes that's a pride thing, I feel like, too, for
oh, for
us,
sure.
that we have to be willing to let someone in. At that time, I had no headspace for,
Yeah,
the dishes were piling up, the laundry, and we still have a full running family, but totally hit with grief. So I love
yeah.
that you gave that tangible thing of just do. And there are times I don't know what to do for someone, and I literally am like, God, what is something I could do?
Yeah.
So I like that takeaway of. And are there any other things you would encourage
Well,
someone to do?
certainly don't be afraid to ask either on the other side of that, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
uh, hey, I need some help, or just being available, being
Mm,
present without being like hovering. But like again, if
right.
it's lonely or if it's like middle of the night sort of stuff, like that's where like how can I that's where like handwritten notes probably make a big impact. Or playing so many words with friends at at odd hours. I don't know. It could be something really small, but just acknowledging something. I see you, or I'm here. I'm for you.
Mm,
You want that to be felt. But while that's helpful horizontally and relationally that way, doing that vertically, like again, antennas up, like God, like are you there? Are you paying attention? But
mm,
like as we prayed those tough prayers of and honest ones, I'm at least you did with me. I think you will answer those. And you said it earlier. You answered it in a different way, and
mm.
that this is I only found it maybe a year or two after again going through this big long 18-month journey. I found prayer log. I met with another old mentor of ours. This is a Steve French connection way back in the day, where like he connected with me in 2012 in Cleveland doing a leadership program, and he encouraged me to kind of write down a bunch of different things that I was looking for primarily through career, just like life goals. Uh, and I was way too busy even in 2012. Like write them down. Like he's like, what's one thing you'd like to come off your plate that you shouldn't have on your plate? Or conversely, if you can only have one thing on your plate, what's one thing? So like those bookends were helpful. But as he said, hey,
Mm.
write them down and like everything in between. What are some things you'd like to see God do in your life? And I started writing down a list of like 10, 12, 15 different things. Like I had a hard time getting home at dinner at 5 o'clock even, let alone 4:15 of my kids reading when they were 5. So like I want to have dinner with my kids, 3 times a week. I mean, just like very practical things. I like to, have date nights with my wife, or like all of it kind of boiled back into like I wish I had more time. It was kind of the sum, or like I wish I could reprioritize my time, or just kind of have a cleaner slate so that I can do the things that actually matter to me a bit more. And it took almost a decade for God to answer that in a totally different way. I'm like, all right, I'll answer those, but like you're gonna lose your health, you're gonna lose your job, and you're gonna move, and everything's gonna flip
Wow.
on its head. And lo and behold, like I have all the time in the world now. It's a different like I'll fill maybe some of those gaps, but like uh boy, how fruitful has it been that God has delivered on almost. I mean, if I showed you the list, I probably should have it up right now. If I showed you the list of like 10 things, I want to say like 9 of them, like boom, 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 boom.
Wow.
They've all been answered. But I didn't think about it for 8, 9, 10 years until I reflected back. And this is why I think it's good having things on paper. Huh. Look how faithful God was in a radically difficult time, in an unexpected way that was a massive left turn. But what I also like to say is like, but I'm here and I look back in the rearview mirror and it's a straight line to here. It was zigzags all the way through it. And so if you're in the mess right now and it feels like zigzags, just give it some time. And when you look back, I think God was pretty faithful to get me to the exact moment where I needed to be, where I should be. And actually, it's more of a straight line looking backwards than the zigzags when you're in the midst of it. So that's always been clarifying to me and reflection, but it often isn't in a moment.
Jay, I can't help but think there are a lot of people in life, whether it's a guy, a gal, male or female, who are just doing all the things, like go, 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 doing the checklist of life. Like you were, with work and doing things in church, family, all the things. But you had that list, the things that really do matter to us, and how many times have we heard when, one day when people are gone at the end of their life, they don't say, "Oh, I wish I'd spent more time at work." Usually I, wanted to wish I'd spent more time with family or whatever. And what would you tell someone now who's like, "Go, go, go. I don't even have time to think about this, Jay." Like there's too much going on. And God doesn't always allow something like cancer. Sometimes there are other things. For me, it was honestly go, go, go. And then I was sidelined when I was expecting my children. I had no idea pregnancy would be that rough, for me. But that was kind of my quiet, like where I literally had time to process things with God and really pray for my child at that moment. So I believe I would have prayed for them, in our busy life or whatever. But in the middle of the busy, what do you tell that person who's like, I don't even have time to think about what's important to me?
Well, you either can do it by choice or it'll sometimes happen through crisis. And more often than not, it's crisis like, oh gosh, now what do I do? I'm in the thick of it now. And then we kind of like, lift up our hands or, yield. Okay, I submit, but it's much better to do it by choice. And by choice, I mean, how do we carve out margin in our life very purposely, even in our calendar? It can be very practical. I need 2 hours every Friday of white space. Or I need to make sure I have that, whether it's date night or maybe it's date breakfast with my spouse every week or every 2 weeks, or that we have some getaway time or I have some getaway time, or I just like carve it out, like very practically in your calendar. And the hard thing is like we often like to fill it. These days I fill it with sports cards. It's like really fun for me, but like and a good example is like sometimes we get in a car, quick, blast up the radio so that it kind of drowns out minor thoughts. I really do think sometimes we culture ourselves to like keep it on at all times, keep the, particularly the digital stuff on at all times. So it drowns out the depths of our soul. We need to be able to turn it off at times, really put our phones away, digital detox, whatever it may be, so that we can not just listen to ourselves, but listen to God. God, what do you have for me today? What do you have for me this year? What do you have as kind of a future direction that I may not be paying attention to because I'm so dang busy with me and my priorities, and or like, even when we get uptight or upset, I've often learned that the what's really going on is, what's wrong here? I'm not getting my way, and therefore it kind of just takes us out of commission. There's nothing more than the enemy would want to take us out of commission because we're feisty about not getting our way, or we're just selfish people, right? Like it's very natural default mode, and we just like to fill it, we just like to fill it all up with stuff. Literally, like stuff. We'll go buy stuff. We'll fill it up with our calendar, just like fill it. And I don't think that's what God calls us to do. To seek Him first, and like everything else, then it kind of falls, second to that. And I think we can get that priority right first, and then the priority of our people in our life, because the people that are in our life are the point. To learn that the hard way, like no, you need to slow down and be available. One thing that my dad, who worked at home for 60 years, his whole life, he was a self-employed photographer, worked from home. This is the greatest gift to us. I never really knew any different because like my dad was working in the darkroom in the studio, but he was always home. And like when I thought about it as this kind of vocational transition happened, like would it be great to work from home again, pre-COVID environment? It was very strange to say. I think that's what I want to do is work from home. But as I started to scout out and start to talk to people, I actually thought maybe this has been enough instability in my life. Maybe God's calling me to join a business. Versus starting something on my own, which I really had kind of this. I'd like to start something on my own, lay my own shingle, and be my own man, work from home. And even like the location ended up being part of the story too, right? So as we prayed through, it wasn't Dallas, clearly. We actually prayed through Florida first too, and it even started to look So as you pray on one side, we look practically in the other. All right, what schools and what area? What could it look like? And nothing was happening. It was very clearly, well, it ain't Dallas, it ain't Florida. Are we supposed to move? But then we had some loving friends at church. Very strange, like literally get in our face, said, "You need to move to Atlanta." Like literally in our face, "You need to move to Atlanta." It's because they'd lived here before and suggested, and we also need to get further south. I think for both of our health, my health and Courtney's health, just get more sun. It wasn't about the cold; it was more about the lack of vitamin D. So we started scouting south, and we started praying through a triangle, even though Atlanta was first alphabetically and otherwise, between Atlanta, Nashville, and Charlotte. Now, so southeast was kind of close enough up to the Midwest. Dallas was too far. Florida was too hot, or whatever. It just wouldn't work.
Right.
And we had friends living in our face. And again, God can use people in your life. We were sort of friends with them, but like not super close with them. But they were like, Atlanta. Like, God must be wanting us. So I had some time, and I started coming down to Atlanta, scout it out, meet some people. Again, I asked Steve Fredwell, straightened it out, strange connection from 2012 to now 2018. Hey, do you know anybody in Atlanta I should get to know? Who do you know that I should get to know? And he gave me like 10 people. And like 7 of them were like, yeah, I'll meet with you right away. So I started sitting down with 7 different businessmen around town. Wanted to learn about the town, but learn about the opportunities. Here's kind of what I'm thinking I'd like to do, and laying my own shingle and doing some advisory work. And one of them kind of said early, especially with like the age my kids were at, he had done this journey, but he's like, man, if my kids are that age, I don't think that would have been a smart thing for me to do, to start my own business or to be kind of like out there on an island when like, he's like, your wife probably needs more stability at this point. And I came back from that trip like, darn it, I got to join a business and start making phone calls of maybe 2 or 3 people that I could join their company. Mm-hmm. And one of them, answered the call. We started having this conversation. Like Atlanta, interesting because again, we started to scout around Atlanta. We hadn't committed to it yet. That was kind of in the second 6 months of kind of committing to Atlanta. Within that third, 6 months of preparing for the move. So again, 6 months of praying, no idea. All right, maybe we're going to move. Maybe it's Atlanta. Let's scout it out for 6 months, and then 6 months to actually do the move, which we did in middle of 2019. All that being said is when this guy said, join a business, or I heard join a business. He didn't tell me you shouldn't do this. Then I called somebody. He's like, interesting, Atlanta. We were just thinking about building a little hub in Atlanta. Maybe it's a good fit for you. It just opened the door. It didn't like, hey, I want you to launch an Atlanta office for me. It started a conversation with a guy in Arkansas of all places. That it took us 6 months to kind of do a dance to figure out at the end of that. I thought I might join his company because they kind of needed, a couple different. And he says, hey, would you be my advisor? Strangely enough, he actually used that word. Would you be my advisor outside, but kind of inside my company? And so it gave me kind of the job I needed, but without being employed. I was a consultant, if you will, 1099. That I was able to lay my own shingle, but have the stability of kind of a job, but doing it remotely here in Atlanta. Pre-COVID, I was doing all of it via Zoom, or even Zoom was a thing, it felt like. Right. And I'd fly down to, Arkansas every quarter, helping with the offsites. But he asked me to do 2 or 3 things as an advisor, and it turned into like 10 other things over the next couple of years. That it built a very fruitful relationship between me and him and that company. And it actually proved the case. Like, I think what I'm doing with him, I could do with other companies too. And it was just started vocationally coming to clarity as I then brought in a business partner that I worked with for 20 years in the first chapter. And he and I do that type of advisory work for small business owners. And we've done it for maybe 15 or 20 of them over the last 4 or 5 years. So that became clarified just vocationally, but again, it became much more about a real destination or a destiny of going through all of that into a place, not just what I was going to do. And so when people said, oh, you're moving for a job, sort of.
Sort of, right.
Got a new job. It's a little bit different. And what I probably could have done from anywhere, and that's hard for our Cleveland friends to hear, I probably could have done this from anywhere, but we literally moved our family in a pretty big, hefty move south that here we are, 2025.
Right.
All these years later, now my kids have gone through high school here. My son's already in college, and like I'm convinced their trajectory of their life is wildly different because of the move. Not necessarily in a better way, maybe a better way, I think so, but it's definitely different. Their life would have been totally different. I don't know what it would have looked like, but I think for their benefit, and really, Lisa, I wanted to show what I kind of learned through all this process. I wanted to show my kids and to myself and Courtney what faithfulness and then obedience looks like in real life. So like God was calling us very clearly. He was calling us and rooting us out of something into something new. One of my favorite books back here called Necessary Endings. It's a Henry Cloud, where like new things to begin, old things need to end. Old things need to kind of, you have to close a chapter for a new chapter to begin. And sometimes we really hold on to things for too long. Even in the business world, as I talk with business owners, like they're holding on to something too long. Usually it's people, but often it's a product or service. No, we'll figure it out. It'll work. And sometimes we're just holding on to it too long, like this with a closed fist versus like need we should be more open and turning that page. And so when we kind of made that, massive shift and try to show my kids, like, this is what faithfulness and obedience looks like. So if we had not, that probably would have been a definition of disobedience. Like, no, I got this figured out back and I'm going to storm up a different hill or the same hill back when we lived for 20 years. So that's just kind of how our story inflected, is a massive inflection. Again, time is kind of the common denominator through it all, leading up to, through treatment, post-treatment, and then kind of this 18-month window of really kind of figuring what does the next chapter look like. And now time is like, it's a total gift. Like God has blessed us with time more than anything else as a family. And I've kind of needed it at times for myself, my health, coordinating her health, or just being available for my kids that I work from home. And I'm like the chef now of the house. Like, Dad, what are we having for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Can you make them all? Everything right now. So that's kind of the full scope of the journey that
right. Well, thank you for touching on so much of that, because there was a lot of unknown and uncertain that hit you all at once. It was cancer, and then right after that, boom, losing a job, and then trying to sort out some path ahead. And I really appreciate also where you were talking about, we want to do it my way. A lot of times I'll even talk about, the word sin in the Bible, of that middle letter I, because we want to do things my way and do it Lisa's way, do it Jay's way. And, but God's way really does not have the consequences that our way has. And even with what you've been talking about, one of the consequences of choosing to do life our way, sometimes it's our most important people getting shoved to the side more. And so I just kind of thinking about this with, your journey. There is one last question that I wanted to touch on. What would you tell someone who's walking through this? There's so many takeaways from what, just hearing your story, where you found your hope through all of this. People, you guys praying together as a couple, people praying for you. But what would you tell someone walking through this? This is not easy. Like, I remember even you talking about at the time, there was one morning, even going through treatment, where I think you got there and you threw up like 2 times. And that was hard for your wife. And even the nurses seemed a little surprised. And you quoted a movie about, what was it? Sorry, I threw up. Well, I'm going to say threw up. Sorry, I threw up. If I didn't have puke breath, I'd kiss you. You said to your wife. And like, even the humor in that moment, like that obviously was something that played into this. But what would you tell someone? There are rough moments during this, and it does seem dark. And I know there are so many things that you talked about at the time. Like, I remember you talked about one verse from the Bible in the book of John of, in this world, Jesus promised, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And that was an encouragement to you at that time. But just anything else you would tell someone right now walking through this, or seeing a loved one walk through this?
Yeah. My dad had a friend going through cancer who ultimately passed away from cancer. But while she was alive, she made these bookmarks that said, "I choose joy" on them. I heard it at his funeral. It was pretty powerful. But it is a bit of a choice of how you handle a crappy diagnosis, a crappy scenario. Like, it's not fun. It's painful. But there's a choice in there, and joy is not happiness. Joy is a choice. Happiness is a bit fleeting and circumstantial, and we always say, "Hey, I just want my kids to be happy," and like that's not really what I want my kids. I want my kids to learn how to be content and be joyful no matter the circumstances around them. And so, and being able to choose that, and like, all right, I'm going to kind of be laser focused on the choice of joy, but really this open hand mentality of like, more I try to grip it and try to control the outcomes or, steer it in a direction, like we just don't know which direction it may go, good or bad, or indifferent. And may just be kind of a thorn in the flesh for a long time. This is something that Courtney's battled with in just a different way, not cancer, but she had a thorn in her flesh, literally and figuratively, for over a decade. And God, she prays all the time, God, would you take it away from me? And so far, the answer in many cases has been no. There's some days it's been much better. Some days it's not been, but like I would say she's thriving over the last few years because she can still push through, even in tough, dark days, because she knows she has a deeper hope, a deeper connection, not only horizontally with me and others and her kids and her friends. She's great friends here, but vertically with God, who gives her this peace that surpasses understanding. So like that's really what we want to pursue. God, would you give me peace? Would you show up today and like calm my spirit? Would you even if I don't even know if you're there, would you show up? Would your presence be felt even in the doctor's hands today? Would your presence show up in an encouraging word from a nurse? Would your presence show up through a family member I've not talked to in ages and kind of like restore that somehow? Maybe through this difficult circumstance that they may say, maybe they make the first move, like I've been a schmuck. I'm sorry. That like there's reconciliation, even if it's painful physically or painful emotionally in that scenario. Like, hey, well, God, would you show up today or show me your love in tangible ways that I know that you're there, that I know that I am loved, that I'm cared for, and that I'm not alone in this, or that's not just all darkness. So would you show me your light? Would your light radiate through others? That then gives me, energy and hopefulness. And again, that choice around pursuing joy is it's an important one, because like, is my life gonna be better because I got Jesus at my side, where he says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light? Do we believe that? Do we think that? Or do we actually live that in a way that becomes practical? Like, all right, today was rough, this round of treatment. And again, it was cumulative. By the end of treatment, it's like, I can't lift a finger. I'm cash me out. But to stay like, dialed in, spiritually and then emotionally, and then kind of let God kind of do what he does physically, as the great physician. Like, I've been healed, but he's also giving me new life in more ways than one. That like, wow, that's a whole new chapter that I never saw coming.
Wow, that is powerful, just all of that. And I do want to throw in there too, sometimes when we pray, like we touched on earlier, we don't have the answer we want. We did lose your dad, to cancer, and at a later time after yours. And so we don't know. But I love how just you talked about your hope, your anchor, choosing joy. Oh my goodness, what a powerful takeaway that really is with that. Well, Jay, I just thank you so much for being here and just kind of walking through thriving in the mess of cancer, just all that goes on with that. And then you had a lot more pile on to that, and still choosing joy and creating space. That's another big takeaway. I feel like just that making time to process, because we just can go sometimes. And even if we're working multiple jobs or something, just kind of some headspace, just carving out some place to process with all this. But thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And friend, I hope you'll join me next time on Thrive in the Mess.